biodiversity loss is literally putting a road through a large piece of habitat, which can have just as dramatic effects. Now, of course, those roads then are there to transport or use of transport, which is driven by fossil fuels. So there's another key connection there.
One of the key drivers, undoubtedly, is the development of infrastructure. And so when roads and ports connect what were once remote areas of habitat with global markets, those remote areas of habitat very often quickly disappear, especially if there is fertile soil beneath the rainforest or the savanna that's there. So the development of infrastructure is definitely a big part of that habitat degradation piece and also the exploitation piece. So what we can see here is the pressures on the natural world mounting in relation to the pace of the great acceleration, and then we can begin to measure some of the consequences of this in terms of declining wildlife populations. So this is a diagram that is drawing on material presented in WWF's Living Planet report. There we produce a piece of research called the Living Planet Index. This basically is monitoring changing vertebrate populations, mammals, birds, fish, reptiles, over time. And you can see this decline in the total populations, that dark line revealing the trend. And we just published the most recent iteration of the Living Planet report to reveal that in the year in which the data stops, 2014, we can now show a 60% decline in animal populations since the baseline year of 1970. So this is less than one human lifetime.
And isn't that right, that we had already gone through a massive destruction of nature before 1970?
Exactly. So the 1970 baseline is already a depleted point.
Yeah.
If you went back 500 years, we'd already lost some big animals as a result of human activities. But by the time you get to 1970, we're way down on the natural state. And then you can see we've gone from even that depleted place to where we are now in a very short time.
Shocking is too mild a word for this. This is mind-boggling. And I believe within this past year, a few scientists have reported that insect populations have declined 70 or 75%.
Indeed. So we have data, and actually that brings us to the next slide, Stuart. This is a decline in populations. Obviously, when a population reaches zero, you have an extinction, and this gives us a little sense of the shape of the curve in terms of the rate of loss of animals and plants right now. And in the middle there, in the inset, you can see something relating to invertebrate populations. You can see the big numbers that are decreasing, the dark red showing the increasing, which is only a small proportion of beetles. But the insect population crash that's going on alongside the vertebrates in some ways is more troubling, because this is the base of many food webs, those invertebrate animals sustaining many populations of mammals and birds. And of course, these are pollinators too. So 70% of the world's crop plant varieties depend upon insects for their pollination. And of course, this is then beginning to raise questions about food security. Maybe come to some of that in a moment in terms of what this means for people.
It means we're screwed.
Longer term, it will do if we don't do something. But this diagram is just simply showing the extent to which the species loss has increased. And this is the beginning of what could turn into a mass extinction of species on planet Earth, literally not seen for 65 million years. And the last time this kind of change occurred when the Earth collided with a comet or an asteroid, marking the end of the dinosaurs. So we are entering a period that very soon will look like that in the distant future fossil record if we don't change what we're doing. And so that brings me then to this, possibly the most important point, is the need for a new deal for nature and people. This is at the heart of what WWF is now calling for. And you will see that we're describing here in that green line a period of long-term decline and the opportunity in 2020 for the world to come together to be integrating what it's doing on climate change, what it's doing on biodiversity, what it's doing on sustainable development, to slow down the loss so that by 2030 the trend is reversed. we'd be entering into a period of very low carbon development, heading towards net zero, and we would be in a period of ecosystem restoration, leading to the reversal of those trends I just showed you earlier in terms of the population loss at least, and avoiding that mass extinction. So we can do this. Humankind can do this. This is within our gift. The question is, do we have the global collective political will to put in place a deal for nature and people that will signal that the moment has come where we now will embark on this historic project? And in 2020, we will have the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly. And at that meeting, we are calling on world leaders to put in place a declaration that will do what I just described. Increase ambition to stop the mass extinction and restore nature, increase the ambition to phase out greenhouse gas emissions, increase the ambition and urgency of actually implementing the full package of the Sustainable Development Goals, and to see those three things as an integrated plan underpinned by a global declaration from heads of state. That's what we can do if we decide to do it. And one of the things that I think would help us on that journey is if we have more citizens asking for our leaders to do this. And especially young people, I think, would see the sense of bending that curve in the direction of recovery by 2030, because down that curve lies all our futures. And the implications of continuing on the downward trajectory are too awful to contemplate.
And we had very strong words yesterday from a group of students from Berlin, and we've had Greta Thunberg, and we've had young people standing up absolutely disgusted at the lack of action that's happening on climate change. Now, for those young people, it's sometimes been only in the last year or so they've actually understood anything about climate change. Now, what we're saying, and it's a necessary part, is they can't just understand about climate change. They need to understand more than that, because they need to get angry, not just about what's not being done on climate change, because if we solve climate change and we don't solve these other issues, we are in just as bad position. And there is a real risk that we do not provide solutions that deal with the whole picture.
Indeed, and we were reminded by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in October this year, through the medium of the 1.5 degree report, that actually we can't even solve the climate problem unless we get to grips with the continuing degradation of the natural environment. That needs to be stopped and reversed. And we talk a lot about negative carbon technologies in these kinds of meetings. We actually have one already, and we know it works. It's called a tree. Should we reforest large parts of the earth?